Thanks for tuning in to a bonus portion of the Past Our Prime podcast. A member of the United States Bicycling Hall of Fame, Mike Neel, has done everything in the sport of cycling, dominated here in the States, went to Italy to ride with the world's best and more than held his own, came back and had a successful career in coaching. And now, 50 years after that win in the Sierras, Mike Neel joins us on the Past Our Prime podcast. Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Good. You know, Mike, I read a few stories about you, and it really seems, without getting into too many details, you know, I know you at one point ran away when you were really young and got into a little bit of trouble or a little scary times, and a bicycle really saved your life, didn't it?
That's kind of true, yes. I, grew up in the Bay Area, and I used to be work in the warehouseman's union, and I was a caddy. I was the only white caddy. And I, worked in the Bay Area when I was younger, and then I got into cycling. Thanks to Peter Ridge, I should say.
Yeah, that's a great story. Tell me about that, because you discover biking or cycling, and you see a bike in a store, and it's $95, which is $94.99 more than you had. And what does Peter do?
So I walked into Velosport there, and I had long hair. I'm not sure if I had shoes or not. And I saw that it was a Raleigh International, and it was all Campagnolo, but it had Weinman brakes. And I think it was like $100, and I only had 50. And then he let me take the bike. And then I took that bike out the door, and I rode over to the San Rafael Bridge, and hitchhiked across, and I rode all the way up Highway 1 to Mendocino. And then I slept on the beach there, and there was some old barn or something. So then I'm riding home, through Santa Rosa, and more inland. And the tires started getting soft, and I didn't know it, but sew-ups, you got to pump them up. But I didn't have a pump. I had no idea. Anyway, so I eventually made it back hitchhiking and brought it back to the shop, and they explained to me how to put air in the tires.
Live and learn, right? Live and learn.
So, yeah, that was thanks to Peter. And then, of course, I paid him for the rest. But, yeah, I worked at Velosport on and off. I worked at his ranch on and off for years. And unfortunately, as you know, he passed away. And I wanted to mention one of my favorite teammates, Calvin Trampleasure, also passed away last year.
Mm.
So that was really sad. He was an elementary school teacher, and they called him Mr. T, and he was a great one. So, yeah, one of my best friends. So it's been kind of a tough year.
I'm sorry for your loss. I imagine, it's a small world, the cycling world, is it not?
It is. Everybody knew Calvin by his nickname of Haystack. So, yeah, it is a small world.
What did you love about cycling, Mike? What was it that you really just you felt when you were on a bike?
I mean, like I say, I had worked in factories and as a longshoreman and all that, caddy, and then I also worked at Golden Gate Field. I was a groom. I took care of the horses. And then in cycling, I thought, that's an easy way to make money. And one of my first races, I got fourth place. I think it was in Sacramento, Criterium. I thought, if I didn't ride so dumb, I could have won that. So then, and then when I raced, for example, in the Midwest in the early 70s, we made good money because we raced Tuesday nights in Kenosha and Thursday nights in Northbrook on the track, and then usually at least one or two criteriums on the weekend. And I'll bet you the prizes were as much or more then as they are now.
Wow.
But we raced 4 times a week, and there were all these old Belgians and Italians who ran the whole thing out there, and they were great. And people like Otto Wentz, he ran Super Week, and Midwest was good. California had good races, but it didn't have any money.
Right. Like in this article in Sports Illustrated, I think they paid you in tire pumps and clothes or something like that. Do you remember that race in the Sierras?
I very much do remember it.
It sounded pretty harrowing.
It was a good race. It's sad they don't have anything like that anymore. It was a really good race, and it was in Reno and Lake Tahoe. George Mount was actually in that race and did really good. And that's where I first noticed George Mount. And yeah, Peter Rich put that on Tour of the Sierras. But anyway, yeah, I just remember it was a really good race. And when you're young, you don't feel the altitude so much or the heat. And I think I won a couple stages, and we won overall.
In the article, they mention, I want to say in Carson City, like it didn't seem like the people of Carson City knew there was a bike ride going on. There were pedestrians in the streets and police officers and 18-wheelers. Yeah. You guys had to deal with all sorts of things.
Yeah, you probably know about the famous officer rep who stopped the race on the freeway.
So tell us that.
The highway patrolman, he said, well, you can't just race down the road. Stopped like 100 riders right on the freeway. I think that was in the article. I'm not sure. But anyway, that was a pretty famous incident.
So
he was wrong about that. Right.
You have success pretty quickly once you got in the saddle, and you decide to take your show on the road and head to Italy. What was that like?
Yeah, no, actually, first I went to France. There was a person named Owen Mulholland, rest in peace. I think he passed away from cancer. And anyway, he lived in France, in Grenoble. And he said, yeah, we can get you on our team here. So I remember I flew to Paris, and they tried to take my bike on the train. They said, you can't take your bike on the train. You got to check it in. So I stayed like in between the trains and kept my bike there. And I remember trying to negotiate riding from the Gare du Nord to the Gare de Lyon, the southern one, and then taking the train to Lyon and getting off and then going to Grenoble. And then I worked in a little bike shop there, and I won a couple races. But yeah, and then in the winter we did 6 days. Roger Young was my partner. We were Neel Young.
Yeah.
And we did the amateur 6 days. We got like second in the Cologne 6 day, for example. The amateur one, and Roger was a good partner. And I knew a guy named Jeff Leslie, who's still around, who is from Tasmania, and he was in Italy. And he said, yeah, I can get you on this Italian team. So I drove to Italy. I remember I had a little Carmen Ghia Volkswagen and barely made it. And anyway, yeah, I drove to Italy, and I fit in better there. And I really liked it there.
For people that have never cycled and they just watch images of it, to me it seems like cyclists are some of the greatest athletes in the world because the cardiovascular, the strength you need going up mountains. Can you describe what it's like and the drain it takes on you to do the distance and the challenges you face?
I mean, yeah, like I said, when you're young, you think that's normal. You suffer, but you don't realize you can suffer a lot more if you put your mind to it. But anyway, it's just a different thing. And then, of course, back then, we didn't really have coaching, and you had to make up everything for yourself. That's what later made me a good coach, because if you're a really strong rider and everything's done for you, you don't learn anything, because you can just make up for it by being strong. But when you have to suffer and you have a higher level to compete against, you learn a lot of the tricks. And then, like a really strong rider will let the brake get 5 minutes, then think he's going to bridge across, which is really knucklehead. You can't do that. And then, anyway, things like that. So, yeah, you have to learn the tactics, and it's more than just the physical part.
I was reading about your coaching, your training regimen that you had at one point. Just the thing you said, 4 hours of snowshoeing, 3 hours of cross country skiing, 2 hours mountain hiking, an hour of hiking. Dang. How did that go over, and how many of your guys did all that?
That's because they were from Colorado, most of the guys, Andy and Davis and Ron Kiefel. They were from Colorado and they were used to the snow. And yeah, we had to man up. Had to get ready to be pros, and you have to be strong. So that really helped them. And the time, sorry to jump forward a little bit, but when we won the Giro, I had a big talk the night before, and I told the guys, this is our chance. You guys are used to the snow. You did snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, and running uphill. And so it's supposed to really snow tomorrow. So we went out and bought all kinds of ski gloves and clothes and hot thermoses, and had them rub ointment all over, their legs and everything, and underneath their jerseys, and Vaseline all over their whole bodies. And then that saved us that day, and that's the day where Andy pretty much won the Giro. Because it was like everybody was getting hypothermic.
So you were prepared.
Yeah.
We were prepared. I remember there was a guy on the Stelvio who had been in a breakaway, Johan van der Velde, and I think he was leading the Maglia Ciclamina.
Heard him.
Anyway, he was in breakaway at the top of the hill where it was really snowing. He was just stopped on the side of the road. He couldn't move. He couldn't do anything. So I had hot bottles of tea. So I handed him one. He's standing there. I'll never forget. He couldn't even grip it. It fell right through his hand and fell on the ground.
Oh, wow.
And that's how cold it was. But Andy had wool gloves. He had a wool hat. And the wool hat is really important because you lose a lot of your body heat through your head. So the wool hat and the ointment and the rain jackets and the hot tea and everything, that was pretty much where we won the Giro. So that all that training paid off.
So these are certainly not the kind of elements that someone thinks about when they think about cycling. You have probably ridden or coached guys that have ridden. I mean, you're talking about riding in a snowstorm. I mean, I'm sure you've seen everything from 100-degree plus to driving rainstorms. Is there one in particular that was really harrowing?
Yeah, that one. That was by far the worst one.
Except for at the end, you guys won, so it made it a little bit better, I suppose.
Oh yeah, I remember Bob Roll, for example. He was frozen at the finish. He was blue. He was really hypothermic. I, of course, had to stay up with Andy. At one point in time, my car wouldn't even go. We had to get out and push the car to get it to go, and I had to let the Panasonic car go in front. And then when Andy, I insisted he put on his rain jacket. When he went to do that, Eric Breaking attacked and got a lead and actually won that stage. And Andy got second, but it still moved him up enough. That was the nastiest day I've ever seen. They wouldn't have that today. They would for sure cancel that.
Right.
So were there other instances where you said you feared for your life, where you said, what the heck am I doing?
I mean, no, I was in the car. I was fine.
Well, yeah, that's the same place.
Smart man.
But wasn't there one situation in a car? Did I read this wrong? That you were in a coma?
Yeah, that was something I wanted to clarify because I get a lot of blame for that. And back in the days of 7-Eleven, when we were starting up, we didn't have a lot of money. So one of the guys, and it was actually a guy who I think the world of, Jeff Pierce, he had won one of the stages. He had forgotten his plane ticket that they had given him. And he didn't have a plane ticket. So I never really thought about this till later. I could have just bought another one. But I gave him mine. Back then it didn't matter the name, the ticket.
Right.
So he took my ticket, and I said, yeah, I'll just sleep in the back of the team car, and I'll meet you guys in Paris. So then I was sleeping in the back of the team car, and the team mechanic, Mike Hanley, fell asleep at the wheel going 100 miles an hour. And I woke up in the hospital. I was in a coma. I had a skull fracture. And yeah, that pretty much was the end for me. I've ruined my life. That messed me all up. I never got like a claim or anything. And then that was, I still have effects from that.
And that was in the late that was in the late 80s, Mike?
That would be in '89.
89.
Coming from the Tour of Pays Basque, and we won 2 stages there. Andy Hampstein won a stage, and Jeff Pierce won a stage. And so that, for us back then, you could imagine these days, those are big wins.
Right.
Yeah.
Had a lot of big wins. And like my last days before that accident with the team. Yeah. And I did that just because our economics at the time.
You got a chance to compete in the 76 Olympics in that men's individual road race. What do you remember from that?
And in the Olympics, it was like they lined you up by how your team did in the last Olympics. Of course, the U.S. had never had one finisher ever in the Olympics, and so we were like on the last row. So in the week before the Olympics, they had the Tour de Quebec, and George and I rode, and I was like team captain, and George was always way stronger than me. And then, so at the start of the Olympics, we're at the very back. And I knew that after 1 kilometer, there was the Côte de Liège, which was a really steep, windy little climb. And that if we were in the back, that was it. You know, the brake was going to go. We'd never make it. So I said to George, this is a true story. I said, George, follow me. We went all the way around the very front. I raised my hand. How many laps? Boom, the race started. That's a true story. We were at the front. And I have a picture of us on the Côte de Liège with me leading George. And it was right after that, I said, George, you got to go now. And George made the break, and which I could not have done. And he made the break and stayed in there and got 6th. And then, that's what happened. And then on my last lap, I was planning on winning the field sprint. Because, you know, I was kind of doing that those days. I had won a stage in the Tour de Quebec the week before. Anyway, I was behind this Czech rider. And the Czechs on those days rode on these tires called Barums. And Barums were notorious in the rain and the wet. And sure enough, he slipped out in front of me, and I crashed over him. I crashed into the crowd. And, with 1 mile to go, I couldn't finish because I didn't crash out. So I was sad about that. But I was happy because, we made a breakthrough for American cycling. George got 6th.
You know, this was only a couple years after you had been in Peter Rich's bicycle shop, and now you're racing in the Olympics with guys that became lifelong friends of yours. I mean, in some ways, were you just, living a dream?
I mean, one day at a time back then. And, I worked at the bike shop. When I was on the Manifex team, I made mattresses in Italy. They had to tell me to slow down. American, you're making us look bad.
Well, you did get in Sports Illustrated. What was that like to be featured in an article in Sports Illustrated back in 1974?
It was just a couple months ago. My sister-in-law had a brand new copy of that magazine with Gerald Ford on the cover and that.
Yep.
Right. Oh, yeah, I remember that. So, that was great. But, we didn't make any money.
No.
But it was great to get the recognition. So, I remember I liked the photographer. I liked the guy who wrote the article.
Now, Mike, did you ever come across Lance Armstrong? Have you ever gotten to know him?
That's a great question. And for 2 reasons. Once, I just watched the Lance Armstrong Stop at Nothing like yesterday. And so I knew Chris Carmichael. I was his coach. So all the time, if I did see Lance, he would call me coach because everything Chris told him was stuff that I had told Chris. So I know that, he got a lot out of that from Chris Carmichael. And then, I didn't know about, that we did 7-Eleven, there were viewers that driven snow. Andy Hampstein was completely clean, would not take a needle. And so, we didn't do it that way. So, I can't really judge Lance, but I can just say that we didn't do it that way.
Yeah.
And all of our success was just from, 4-hour snowshoeing.
yeah, that would do it, man. Damn.
Very good. Very good.
Oh, so we do a little segment, a trivia segment on the show called 50-50. And this one's really subjective. I'll give you a 50% chance of getting this right. And there is really no right answer because it is subjective. But is Breaking Away the best cycling movie ever made?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me think. That's the one where the kid speaks Italian.
Yeah.
I know a lot of the people in there, like Eddie Van Geis and John Vanderbilt. Eddie Van Geis was the mean Italian who put his thumb through his spine.
Yeah, that wasn't fair at all.
That was
Come
mean of him.
on, man. And they stripped his gears down?
But you never challenged like a truck to a race, like try to race the truck.
No, but I did motor pace out in the Midwest when we were in Pan Am's training camp. And I would go like 60 behind the truck or something. And I remember everybody was all shocked about that. But yeah, I did do that.
You know, Mike, it seems like cycling saved your life. At some other points, it almost took your life. But from that point forward, once it became such a part of you, you decided to then pay it forward, help as many as you could as a coach and a mentor. I'd say it's a life well lived. So congrats, and thank you so much for coming on our show today. We really appreciate it.
Okay, no problem. Can I also say that I wanted to mention Dale and Wayne Stepman?
Sure.
They were from the Midwest, and they were the Stepman family. And they traveled around in this big RV. And anyway, I had a lot of respect for them.
Absolutely. I appreciate you doing that. Yeah, it's the people that we don't know that make such a difference in other lives, you know?
I know, like Peter Ridge, Albert Eisentraut, people like that.
All those people, yeah. And you, Mike Neel, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay, then you're welcome.
Well, there you have it, a guy named Mike Neel. These are just the little tidbits that you go through in an article.
Yeah.
And he's just getting started back then cycling. And the next thing you know, 50 years later, it's been his life. It almost kills him in Italy. It saves his life when he's in Mexico. I mean, it's taken him all over the world.
Yep. It's amazing how life works that way, isn't it? You know, here was a guy that just was floundering, or just floating around, and then all the stuff that he's gotten to do is. But I don't want to speak for you guys. I didn't know what to expect out of this interview.
Yeah.
Did you?
No. Of course
I
not.
didn't know. I don't know enough about bicycling, but that's what I'm saying. Sometimes we get these guys in, and you leave going, oh my, I didn't know that.
Right.
Oh my God, that's great. Because he didn't get into the minutia of bicycling.
Right.
He basically said, this is what happened, and we should have done this.
I gave the guy a hot tea.
Yes.
And he couldn't
Yeah.
hold it.
You could picture it
because
going through his hand.
His hands were frozen.
Yes.
And I'm like, what? And my first reaction is, why are you cycling
Yes.
in a snowstorm?
Yeah,
You know?
I love the fact that he knew the guy for Breaking Away, the Italian writer that
I know he
kicks him
did.
over.
I know he did.
Yes.
And I just watched
If
it
we
last
had
night.
said Dennis Quaid, he'd be like, I don't know who that
Yeah,
is.
that's right.
But he mentioned a couple
And the
of
guy even got
cyclists.
the little thing where he puts the thing in his wheel, and then he says something to him too, like "Bonjour" or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, damn, you knew the bad dude.
Yeah, very good.